Good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly webinar. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter School Association. I am joined today by Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of Charter Schools Office at New York State Education Department, and Angeli Matos, Executive Director, Policy and Operations at New York City Department of Education, as well as Aaron Cochran, Managing Director in the same office, and Corey Callahan from the New York City Charter Center. Today's webinar, we will follow the same format as in the past. We will begin by hearing from authorizers, fielding questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Then we will transition to New York City DOE specific questions and topics. As we all know, on Friday, Governor Cuomo announced that schools will remain closed to the end of the academic year. We have a lot of related topics that our panelists will cover in today's webinar. Before we turn to the panel, I want to draw everyone's attention to a couple of items. First, there will be a poll that you'll see in the chat. It's on the PPP SBA loan program. Please take a few seconds to fill that out when it pops up, and you'll see the results at the end of today's webinar. Next, I want to talk about a bill in Congress that was introduced by New York Congresswoman Grace Meng, the Emergency Educational Connections Act of 2020, bill number HR 6563. Would provide $2 billion to help students who do not have access to technology so that they can continue with remote learning. We will post a link to the bill in our Action Center. You'll see it as well in the chat. Another item, the New York Times put out a request on its opinion page for educators to share their thoughts and experiences on the importance of zip codes and its impact on academic achievement. The voices that we would like to make sure are out there are the charter school educators. Those voices are necessary to spread the word on how charter schools change the paradigm. The link to the New York Times opinion page article will also be posted in the Action Center. I encourage you to check out both the bill and the New York Times article and take action if you're so inclined. I also want to talk briefly about the need for advocacy, again, at the state and local level. There's a great deal of anxiety about funding for charter schools, when districts will submit payments, will they be on time, will they be in full, right? Will charter schools be treated fairly? What are the state aid payments going to look like at all from the state? And as I did last week, I want to encourage you to reach out at the state and local level, but I also want you to encourage you to educate congressional members on the importance of federal aid to New York State. We need their help. We need the money to provide school aid and to avoid cuts to all schools. So it's very important. Start now. Educate yourselves on what's needed. If you need to reach out to us for more information, please do so. Email, call me. Many of you have done that in the past on other issues. Please do that on this. We hope to post something or get something out to you at some point as a group to help educate folks. But right now, please make sure that you do reach out to your federal folks and or educate them on what's going on and the needs for federal aid. So beyond the funding, there's also continued attacks and sort of egregious actions that have been happening across the state. In case everyone's not aware, I'm just going to run through a few of those. Buffalo charter schools are dealing with a clawback of funds in the district and have resorted to filing a lawsuit. The Rochester School District, of course, implicated charters for their own mismanagement of district funding and their budget. Similar things happened in Hempstead. New York City schools repeatedly have to fight for space. And yesterday, the Board of Regents denied the renewal of a charter school that is one of the highest performing schools in Buffalo because of a concern that its renewal would come with an expansion of its elementary school grades and the financial impact that it could have on the district. All of these actions happen on the backs of students and their families. The comment from yesterday's Board of Regents meeting that I'm still trying to wrap my mind around was from one of the regents who asked, what will the students do, who when asked for what will the students do if the charter school isn't allowed to expand, said, let them go back to the district schools. That dismissal of students' needs and their choices and the best academic option for them was galling. As far as I'm concerned, the regent might as well have said, who cares? I care, and I'm sure all of you on this webinar care. So together we need to tell them exactly who cares. We have to collectively join the fight to beat back these attacks and the ignorant official actions meant to rip school choice out of the hands of students and families. I will be reaching out to you to ask to join together in an advocacy campaign with a unified voice to fight for access to great schools. Look for that, and I hope we can join together and fight this good fight. Having said all that, let's turn back to the panel. Our panelists, thank you for joining us all today. David, Susie, and Aaron, let's begin by discussing Governor Cuomo's announcements. On Friday, the governor announced all schools will remain closed through the end of the year, and remote learning will continue. There are a lot of issues implicated here, some of which I know you may not have the answers to right now, but could each of you talk about what you think schools should be thinking about doing and prioritizing right now? And David, we'll start with you.
Well, hi, everyone. First and foremost, I hope everyone is well and healthy and safe. And certainly we've had a very interesting 48 hours and here at SED, and I'll let Yumika's comments stand where they are. Regarding continuity of learning, indeed, we will be in this virtual learning environment for the remainder of the school year, and we fully expect all Board of Regents authorized charter schools to provide to implement their continuity of learning plans through their regularly scheduled conclusion of the academic year. I think that it would be a detriment to both the academic as well as the developmental progress of your students if you were to end school early. And keep in mind that students don't have summer programming to go to. They don't have friends to go to the playground with, to play with. And we know that as good as our continuity of learning plans and remote instruction plans are, that it's just no substitute for brick and mortar instruction. And so students need more learning time, not less. And so that's our expectation for Board of Regents authorized charter schools. In addition, Governor Cuomo was very clear what he expects schools across the state, including charter schools, to think about as they envision and as they develop plans for returning, hopefully. And some of those questions are how can you monitor the spread of COVID-19 in your schools? How can you partner with your local departments of health and districts to do that? How can your school instill parent confidence? How can you ensure student safety? How and will extracurricular activities reopen in the fall? Do protocols for students with disabilities change? Again, working with your Committee on Special Education on that. What steps need to be taken to ensure the mental health, social, emotional well-being of your students? And thinking outside the box in terms of your academic calendars. Changes in calendars, again, we encourage you to think about how you can maximize learning time, not decrease learning time. And we encourage all of you to work with us as your authorizer to think through those issues. Some of these questions you can't go alone, and particularly as they relate to public health. And so further guidance will be forthcoming. As you know, the governor has a Unpause New York task force. The State Education Department is putting together a task force on this. I know that the State Association and the Charter School Center, as well as individual schools, are thinking through this very diligently. And so we encourage you to take a community approach and don't go this alone. I welcome any questions later on, and I'll turn it over to my fellow authorizers.
Okay, great. Erin?
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I think this was pretty expected for the most part, so I think our perspective is that folks should just continue doing a lot of the thinking that we've already advised you to be doing. including continuing to iterate as needed and to implement your continuity of education plans, and to continue thinking about what a return to school buildings next fall could look like under different scenarios and what questions you have about that. Like David mentioned, I'm sure as Susie's going to mention, we do expect DOE authorized charters to continue with your distance learning plans for the duration of your previously scheduled school year. If for whatever reason your continuity of education plan needs to be updated to account for longer distance learning or for any other reason, please definitely submit a new one and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you. Susie.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here on a Tuesday afternoon. We had a number of the schools join us, the SUNY schools that are up for renewal next year, join us on a webinar this morning. So some of you may be seeing me at the beginning and close of the day, which is pretty exciting for us. A couple of additional notes. We let some of the schools know this morning, but for all SUNY authorized charter schools, starting, we think around, I don't know, May 8th, so later this week, we hope to be getting the survey out to you, and we'll be asking each school or group of schools to respond to that survey, again, because that's going to help us capture and flesh out the stories of how you pivoted and really supported students. Yamika's comments at the beginning about telling the story of what charters are providing, we know is extraordinarily important and will continue to be so. So that survey data for SUNY at least is really helpful for us. In addition to that, we're scheduling our second round of interview phone calls with schools, with all SUNY authorized schools. Thank you again for your time. The team loved talking to all of you a few weeks ago, and they can't wait to hear about all of the things that you've improved in that time. As we've been thinking about Governor Cuomo's announcement and talking with an awful lot of all of you, while we are in this place and we're continuing to do a great job to close out the end of this year and think about summer and next year into the unknowns, I think there are some things that we have to start doing now. And so again, because we've got statewide schools, I'll say this very broadly, there's kind of a list of that. One is start developing a relationship with your local Department of Health. Call them, send them an email, let them know who you are, talk to them about your families. Do the same thing. Even if you have school counselors, there may be that your city or location has mental health professionals that are volunteering or sharing their time. Make a relationship with them in order to start thinking about the mental health needs of you can always think about your authorizers mental health needs, but also of your school and your staff as you're thinking about coming back and how to create a nurturing and supportive place. Tag in with all of your community-based organizations. I know so many of you are leveraging those community-based organizations to help with a lot of family needs, both in terms of first responder frontline worker care, but also provision of food, access to Wi-Fi, a number of things. And more specifically for what we're thinking about, I need you to start thinking now about the kinds of flexibilities you'll be looking for. And I would say both in terms of regulatory relief, because if there's a large set of schools that need similar kinds of regulatory relief as we think about going into the fall, we want to know what that is and do the best we can to be a voice for that to get ahead of it. Similarly, in your charter contract, there may be areas in your charter contract if you're thinking about pursuing the opportunity to do a blended model if there needs to be a pivot next year or for other reasons. Again, think about what regulatory relief you might be requesting, think about what contractual relief you might be thinking about requesting. If you think there will be shifts in significant shifts in your curricular program, we would want to understand and know about that sooner rather than later. And the other things that kind of pop to mind are, in the absence of state assessments, are there some externally validated interim assessments that you might want to use for next year in order to gauge student learning in a little bit more thoughtful and planful way. Start thinking about if you are going to provide some sort of blended model or asked to shift your program to that, how you can maximize instruction, the greatest amount of synchronicity, so that we know your students are getting as much human interaction in their instruction that's live and responsive to their needs as possible. We're kind of working on a little bit of a checklist of these things, and we'll get that out to the schools. We don't have all of the answers, but we can help find some of the good answers if you tell us what the questions are. So thanks a bunch. Ready to address any of the other questions coming up.
Okay, thank you very much, Susie. Looking ahead, do you all anticipate any new or changing requirements or reporting for schools as a result of the closure? And we'll start back again with you, David. Anything not covered in the first part?
Was the question, are there new reporting requirements for schools?
Any new changing or reporting requirements for schools as a result of the closure?
We are going to work closely with schools to ensure that they've developed a reopening plan for the fall. We encourage all schools to be communicative with their families. In fact, I'll share the link, but we put an exemplar letter from a fantastic school that we authorized in the Bronx, Creo Prep. They wrote what I thought was a great letter to their families, and so we'd encourage you to be communicative, and certainly you can use the Creo letter as an exemplar. We also, as Susie mentioned, the authorizers are working together with Stanford University to put out that survey, and we want all of our schools to participate so that we can get information that we need in order to help support you. So that would be another requirement, but otherwise, I don't think that there'll be any state requirements above and beyond what I just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. So do you want to add?
Yeah, you're going to hear it frequently and often. Survey. We are making some modifications to both. We talked with the team this morning about this, both to what we're asking for in terms of applications for renewal, and we are likely to make some modifications to kind of end of year annual reports or those reporting pieces. We'll want to understand, we'll try to do it in the least time-consuming way, and maybe at a, we're going to try to shoot for a time frame when you won't be overwhelmed with actually operationalizing your reentry plans. So we're going to try to embed any additional questions that we might want some information around in the documents that you normally have to report with. So as we don't add on any more than this survey that we've done this spring.
Thank you. Erin, do you want to add as well?
Sure, just adding a little bit. So the survey that David and Susie mentioned, currently our plan is to send this as well to DOE authorized schools. So we'll definitely be in touch more with the timeline there. And we may also be requesting additional information to help inform renewals and other accountability needs, but we are currently exploring that. And so we will share more as we know more.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So maybe it's, the answer to this question might be a slightly modified version of what you said, but I'm gonna go ahead here. The governor indicated that schools will have will have to do a lot of things. Businesses will be doing to reopen with regard to social distancing. What work are you doing now, is being done now to help develop the guidance for schools on the operational requirements necessary to reopen? And is there anything schools can do now to help develop the guidance, make suggestions to you for new practices? And we'll open that up. Erin, is there anything you want to share first?
Sure. I know a large dependency for a lot of this guidance that folks are looking for is going to be informed by the various health departments involved. And then I think once we receive that guidance, we will then be able to figure out what that means in the context of school buildings, school buses, lunchrooms, and all of that. So I think that we can think about some of the things that we know we'll likely need, like PPE and that type of equipment. But I do know that we are waiting for a lot of guidance from the health department to inform the other pieces that folks want.
Okay, great. And I see that we just posted in the chat that you have a link for questions for schools to submit on reopening. So just wanted to draw everyone's attention to that in the chat.
Yes, please. That's so helpful.
Perfect, perfect. Susie, just because you have that cute dog in front of you right now, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. I would say that there are a couple of pieces that I think will be extraordinarily important. The governor, in fact, outlined today. He didn't spend enough time on it for me, but did talk about having a Gates Foundation funded task force to look at how we can expand high quality instruction, especially for some of our students who, as David pointed out at the beginning, really have been hit hard in terms of their ability to access instruction in the same way during this time period. And so we will be supportive of that and want to be linked in to as many options and opportunities that are possible. We learned an awful lot. I think we all learned an awful lot about things like attendance, synchronistic instruction versus asynchronistic instruction the time of the day. We're thinking an awful lot about different ways that, schools can think about supporting their staff. The number of staff would be in an at-risk category, we are assuming. And so thinking about how schools could restructure staffing. So this is also on my kind of list of things that we're going to go through. How can you restructure staffing? What are the implications for your contract agreements, your employee agreements? Can you have a team of folks who might be most vulnerable to the virus doing some online lesson prep that then could be delivered bricks and mortar? And then if you have to pivot in the fall, those people are your front lines when you make the pivot. So we're going to be putting out probably a lot of questions or advice about places that would really help us for you to start identifying where the questions and the answers might be, and then we can navigate from there.
Okay, great, Susie. Thank you very much. Just a quick question on that. When you say you're going to put it out, should we be pointing folks to your website? Do you want to add a little bit about that, about where they can look for the information for all the things you just listed?
Yes, the fabulous Mike Lazinski at the Charter Schools Institute at the State University of New York has created a super COVID resource page, and we will definitely put a link there.
Okay, great. Thank you. David, now we'll turn to you.
I would just echo what my colleagues said, and we hope that charters will think outside the box and provide robust instruction to students using the autonomy that they have.
Okay, thank you. All right, turning to high school specifically. In light of the August Regents being canceled, one very specific question we received a number of times is that since the Regents exams have been canceled, but credit in a class can count for Regents credit, when should the last day of remote learning for high school students be?
That's an easy question. The last day of instruction should be your previously scheduled last day of instruction.
Perfect. Susie, Aaron, do you want to add something?
What David
said. All right. Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed. Very good. All right. With that said, we're going to turn it over to Anna for questions from the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much. So sticking with the Regents topic, and going to be a little bit weedy here. So for students who are in 8th grade who are going to take the Algebra Regents and who've passed that class, they're now exempt from that test. So I'm just setting the stage here. In order to get the advanced designation, which currently is not available to students who would have needed to pass the June or the August Regents, will that passage of their 8th grade Algebra Regents count towards an advanced designation down the road once that it becomes available again?
Yes. It will count.
Great answer. Thank you.
As long as they pass the course, they will get credit for that Regents exam.
Great.
Yeah.
And so then what about students who failed the first semester of a Regents course, but are on track to pass the second semester of a Regents course, because typically they would be able to make up a semester during summer school in order to receive the credit for having passed the course. If summer school is not an option, does that mean then that they are not eligible to receive credit for the Regents test? Because if they failed the first semester, even if they passed the second semester, then they would not be eligible for that credit.
So to take the last part first, there's no reason why they wouldn't be able, there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to engage in the coursework during the summer. As usual, all of your schools can have summer instruction. In fact, you can provide summer instruction remotely. I've spoken about this before, but the continuity of learning plans that your schools are putting into place now might revolutionize the way that you provide summer school instruction. It might revolutionize the way that you provide supports for students during the school year. We might see Saturday academies be a thing of the past, and instead have remote instruction on Saturdays. It depends on how you want to proceed. If a student can pass a course and get a credit, then the Regents exam credit they wouldn't receive Regents exam credit. However, if a student does not complete a unit of study, but has otherwise achieved the standards assessed in providing the coursework, they can earn credit for that coursework. So I'll say that again. If a student cannot complete a unit of study due to this current crisis, but based on your own local determination has achieved the standards assessed in the provided coursework, that might be through a local assessment that you provide. It might be some other method. You can give them credit for the course, and thus they would get credit for the Regents exam. This was actually an emergency regulation that the Regents passed yesterday. So that's just something to think about. But the determination as to whether or not and when to provide a credit to your students rests with you. However, I would just caution you, sorry, I'm trying to measure my words carefully, except in the situations that are allowed by a waiver of the regulation or the law by executive order, you should continue to award credit and coursework credit to your students as you normally would.
Thank you. So Susie and Aaron, I would invite you in as well to think through this question of giving guidance to schools potentially around making decisions on the basis of David's answer about planning summer coursework or resources for students who are at risk of failing classes that therefore have implications for future Regents credit.
So I would just say that the Institute is going to do as best we can to support schools in following what the Regents have set forth, right? At the end of the day, it's a Regents exam, it's a Regents credit. We have been very clear that once students achieve that credit, even if it was in the time of Corona, that we will carry that through for all accountability measures forever. With regard to the opportunity for students to have summer supports in order to achieve that, again, we think that is a school by school issue, depending on whether or not you have the opportunity. And I don't know if many of the, I don't know how this is going to shake out from a budget standpoint, but for all of the schools that do have the opportunity to continue to provide instruction to their students in the summer, absolutely.
Thank you. Erin, any additional thoughts?
No additional thoughts. I think that what Susie and David have said pretty much sums it up.
Great. All right, so weedy question. And I so appreciate that you all have been so consistent in your response in terms of the last day of school. Some schools schedule their last day of instruction to be prior to the last day of Regents administration. And so I think in some of those cases, only students taking that particular Regents test come in. I think everyone's probably familiar with this phenomenon. So would the last day of school be considered the last day of instruction for all students, or the last day of what was previously scheduled to be the last Regents date?
I would venture to say that you should have a date that is the last day of instruction, and you should continue to have that date as the last day of instruction. If you would like to supplement your continuity of learning plan and continue instruction on what would have been a Regents Day, I would talk to your authorizer about that. I can't imagine that that we would say no. And you can also, to get to Michael's comment before, that might be a great time, those Regents days that you normally wouldn't be in session, to start thinking about how to prepare your teachers for either instruction during the summer or in the fall. But we have so many unknowns. You might just have to do your best in that regard.
Absolutely, thank you. Susie, Erin, any thoughts?
I would just echo, last day of instruction is distinct and different from when the Regents exams take place. And so we would say last day of instruction, definitely.
Yeah, we would agree with that. I think that's an important clarification. So thank you so much, whoever asked that.
Great. I'm seeing mostly DOE specific questions in the chat, and Shannon and Tina, we will follow up with you all offline. So I think I will use that opportunity to pass it over to Corey, Erin, and Anjali. There was also a question in the chat about sharing out the information from the poll about schools that have applied for PPP and received it. We'll leave the poll open through the end, so we'll use the last couple of minutes to put up on your screens the feedback that we got from folks. So if you have applied for or not applied for PPP and haven't participated in the poll yet, please take a second and do that, and we'll make sure to share that information out at the end. So with that, I'll pass it off to Corey, Erin, and Anjali.
Great, thanks, Anna. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for tuning in. Always good to connect. I just wanted to start, I know there are lots of great programs being run by Authorizers, the association, everyone's doing a lot of stuff, but did just want to bring your attention because some of the questions I'm seeing in the chat, we've been addressing in some forum discussions that the Charter Center has started to do with schools. So if you are interested, if you're New York City Charter, if you're interested in having conversations with your colleagues kind of about best practices and challenges you're facing, whether it be about remote learning or opening up, I'm going to post a link in the chat. So feel free to join us for those. Those are started this week. Moving to DOE related questions, I'm going to start. Anjali, we've got a lot of questions, some coming in the chat about DOE co-located space. And I thought what I'd have you do is if you could just start by reminding folks, if they didn't see it, about the memo that went out on Friday regarding the construction work done in co-located schools. And you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yep, you're great now.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm having some Wi-Fi issues, so bear with me and let me know if at any point I fade out at Corey.
I'll just answer all the questions for you, don't worry.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, so last week we sent out a memo on behalf of our space management team regarding the A190 facilities requests. Please take a look at that memo and follow up with questions, with specific questions to the team there, and I'm going to read out the email address in a minute. But essentially, the memo addressed the fact that we have significant budget cuts this year that are going to affect the plan or the projects that we're able to do in DOE buildings. So we're going to be very limited, and we're only going to approve essential projects. The space management team will be making those assessments on what's considered essential versus what isn't essential. And they would like to engage with schools individually. So please email them at spaceplanning@schools.nyc.gov with questions about your projects.
Okay. Moving on to just co-located schools in general. Now that DOE and all those schools are close to the end of the year, we've gotten some questions about what teachers and or staff are going to be able to enter co-located spaces to either pack up classrooms, pick up things that, again, when we all left in March, didn't know we weren't going back in. How is that going to work for schools?
Yes, so good question. So we are, there are two things, Corey, that I want to mention here. So the first one is general building access. So we are going to issue updated guidelines this week around the steps that schools need to take in order to access the DOE building for, picking up mail, resetting servers, getting more materials for remote learning, etc. We're going to sort of include in that memo what things are going to be allowed. And these are new procedures that are going to be released this week. So that's, keep an eye out for the C Weekly for more details. Regarding the second part of your question about school or classroom pack up and other work that needs to happen before the end of the year, we have raised that question with our leadership team, and we're figuring out the best way to do this. So more to come on that.
I'm just going to summarize some of the other questions, and you should tell us if you have answers now. I also know that, Erin, the survey has been posted and you're asking schools to answer questions if they have specifics on if you're in co-located space. But other questions we've heard about, what is DOE planning for the schools in the fall? And if there's not 100% utilization, how might that be worked out between schools that are co-located? And by utilization, meaning that all the students who should be in the building at any given day are in the building.
Mm-hmm. Right, so that is a work in progress. Right now, I can tell you that 100%, like having all students, like 100% of school population back in session at once is very unlikely. And so our team is hard at work in sort of figuring out how to plan like different scenarios for next year, including summer school, Corey. So I saw some questions coming in the chat and whether buildings were going to be open for the summer, for summer school and for PD, etc. All of that is still to be determined. So more to come.
And I'll just say the last one that we received, and again, I'm sure more will come, but schools are obviously very interested in, even if summer school is not happening in the building, what days would charters historically have started school before the DOE start date after Labor Day? What day or time period will charters be able to start the next school year, even if it is at a modified utilization rate?
Mm-hmm. Uncertain right now, Corey, but I'll take that question back with me.
Okay. So then moving on to your first day of school survey, I think everyone has probably seen in the Charter Weekly that you guys are asking for that information. I believe the deadline is this Friday, but I'll let you correct me if I'm wrong. What should schools be putting down as their first day of school, kind of given the uncertainty of our current situation?
Mhm. Right. So we, by the way, we recognize that this answers in the survey may change over time, and we recognize that you may have to make several entries reflecting the different scenarios that you are also planning for. So I think right now the short answer, Corey, is that schools should enter what they're planning for right now. And the reason we need that information is because we need to plan for MetroCards, for other sort of school district level of support on our end. And so we understand that the dates will very likely need to change this year, but we need something to plan. So please do submit the survey. It's due on the 8th, which is this Friday, I believe. Yep. And if it's helpful to talk through your different scenarios that you're planning for, et cetera, please reach out. We're happy to support.
And then just a couple questions on special education. There was a new consent form process, I believe, announced in last week's Charter Weekly. Can you just speak about that? I know that's been an issue for a bunch of schools.
Right. So the process. So one thing. So in the C Weekly, we issued a one-pager outlining how schools need to upload the email confirmation after the consent form is completed by the provider in CSIS. Now, the process is not new, but a lot of schools reported technical issues, and so we had the team investigate and sort of resolve the issues that were coming up. And so that's all fixed. And please reference the one-pager with the step-by-step instruction to complete that task.
And then are you resuming special education office hours for the New York City Charter Schools?
We are. So we have office hours happening this Thursday at 3. We sent the link out in the C Weekly last week. So please join us there. And we are gonna have these special education office hours every other week. So every other Thursday.
I'm seeing a bunch of questions about, do you know when the DOE calendar for the 2021 school year will be released? A lot of schools, I think, historically have planned based on that calendar.
Yeah, that's a hot question. I don't know the answer yet. We have nudged our people internally, and we're all in the same boat. We're still sort of figuring out what's going to happen next year.
Another summer school specific question. I know you said a lot of that is still in the works, but this one is, charter schools have always been allowed to attend the summer schools at NYC DOE programs. Is that still going to be offered even if DOE is running remotely this summer?
Excellent question, Corey. We'll raise that with our leadership team.
Okay, great. Another question about next year is making sure that every school has a DOE or DOH nurse in New York City. What, if anything, can you tell us around that planning?
Yeah, so we have, I can't confirm anything for next year. However, I will say that before, when everything was happening with COVID, we were making efforts to provide every charter school, every school in the city with a nurse, actually, not just charters. And so if I had to guess, I would guess that we are going to continue making those efforts for next year as well.
And I would just add that, yes, there would be advocacy around that from all of us for schools to make sure that we have this staffing available when we go back into schools. I see on the first day survey, there's a question, Anjali and Erin. Is there a place where all the questions can be found without having to navigate through the survey? I'm not sure if I completely understand that, but maybe that makes sense to you guys.
I can answer that. So I imagine it would be helpful to have the questions so that you know all the information you want so that you can answer it all at the same time. So I think that we could make a PDF of the answers and pop it in a link at the top. So that's a great idea.
Great, and we can do that for DC Weekly, Erin, or do we want to send out an email?
That's a great question. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
Awesome. I know that the survey is due this Friday, so we'll think it through and get back to you.
Yep.
Okay, I see there's been a bunch of chat about an IEP specific question that I can see David is very helpfully answering and providing guidance. I would say, Michael, if you weren't satisfied, this probably looks like a question for the SPED office hours on Thursday, unless Anjali, I don't know if you've been following along, but it looked pretty specific.
We aim to satisfy, Corey.
And then I would say there are a couple questions, I think actually for the authorizers, but they're related to DOE, so I'll just ask them up unless Anjali, you want to say anything before I move to that.
Just two quick things, Corey. I'm gonna put both of the survey links in the chat.
Yep, someone's asking for that.
The first one is the opening questions. So please, as you're planning and coming up with questions, please submit them to us. They're helpful in our planning. I also pasted the special education office hours link there as well. Please submit your questions in advance so that we can prepare and have answers for you.
Great. So the question is, if we decide to change our grading policy to match the DOE, example, a 65 passing grade instead of a charter specified 70, what does the school need to do to effectuate that change?
I would say for the Institute, it's kind of two buckets, right? Do you perceive this to be a permanent change? Maybe three buckets. Permanent change, we're not sure, or definitely just for next year. And if it's for next year, it's something that we would again want to understand and we'll be asking through the various ways that we've already talked about for schools to let us know. And I'm just I'll pop in, Corey, because there was also some questions about what is considered to be material changes to your charter. Yep. We can the Institute can either do separately for our schools how we manage that, or happy to have Ralph join us here and talk about what SUNY considers material changes to your charter. Things like if you're to do a blended learning, that would certainly be one of the things that we would want to understand and approve as a material change. So I don't know if that addresses it. We'll get, it's tough to make a list of everything that is a material change in your charter because we don't kind of have those little asterisks against every line of the charter contract. Maybe we should, but we're happy to think through with you what those are.
Erin or David?
We have extensive guidance on what are material and non-material changes on our website. And I would, we're always happy to talk through this with schools. It sounds like it's a non-material change. Again, I would, Susie's distinction of is this permanent or temporary is important to us. So I would just recommend talking to your Board of Regents authorized charter school liaison about this if you have any questions.
And just to add, I think that we're the same on our end. So if you have questions about modifying your grading policy, please don't hesitate to reach out to charteroversight@schools.nyc.gov.
Great. I know everyone's excited for the survey results, so I'll turn it back over to Yumika and Anna.
Yeah, we're really flexing our Zoom technical muscles here. I will say the thing that we speculated about but did not invest time and energy into figuring out how to do was to play an opening or a closing song. My personal preference was, and I actually don't know the band or the name of the song, but School's Out for the Summer, School's Out Forever. So, so you can sing along to that. That's right. You can bonus points for future webinars where authorizers can jam out to that. So Becky on our team, can I ask you to please, there we go. All right, so it looks like significant percentage of folks who applied and a mix of folks who have received. So I know that there are future conversations going on about that, including something that the Charter Center is working on. But if your school is planning to apply in the future and would like any help, I know I speak for everyone here when I say please feel free to reach out. So Yumika, with that, I will turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I want to, again, thank the panelists, thank everyone who's participating in the call today. And I do want to put the word out for our next webinar, which will be Thursday. And that webinar will focus on parent engagement. And our special guest for that panelist will be Carrie Rodriguez from the National Parents Union. Have a very good day. We will see you again on Thursday.